It's Monday and time for the Back to Business podcast, featuring Calgary's industry leaders. Welcome today's show host, Kim Hayden.
Today we're talking about the energy behind the energy with Gurpreet Lail, CEO of Enserva. But first, our land acknowledgement.
In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Ga'aina, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the E'ahe Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta.
Alrighty, welcome to the show, Gurpreet. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. It's a fabulous way to do a Monday interview.
Absolutely. Kicking off the week. That's what we like to do here at the Back to Business Calgary show, is get people really excited about the week ahead of us, right? I heard you earlier as you're coming in going, I could have used a 3-day weekend.
I think it's just everybody's reality right now that there's so much happening in industry and even within our city itself and the province that it's hard to keep up, but it's a good thing.
And we're going to touch into that because I think that there is so much going on, not only on a local level, but when we look at technology influences globally. The last 8 months, I feel like I can barely keep my breath, keep up with everything that's going on. I'd like to first dive into a little bit of who you are. You said you're actually one of the few and somewhat infamous, I guess, born and bred Calgarians. Tell us a little bit about who is Gurpreet.
For sure. Born and raised here in Calgary. My parents immigrated from India in the late 60s. And then I came along like 6 years later. And I've loved the city. I've never actually thought about relocating. Like when you're younger, you're like, oh, I'll go live across the globe somewhere. But Calgary's always been home, and I think will continue to be home for a long time.
And you grew up in Calgary, and so from 66 to today, there's a lot of change, a lot of shift that's happening in here. And you're a mother also, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a mother of 2 wonderful children. They're 19 and 16 almost. And I say wonderful with an underline now because the teenage years were not so wonderful.
Teenage years, once you get through those, it really gives you a whole new appreciation when the grandchildren come in. Because I'll tell you, I have a grandkid, and I'm like going, oh, I wish I could have maybe just skipped the kids and gone straight to this. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So let's dive in a little as to what you do, because I when I saw that you're in the energy sector, and we just had some unique circumstances hit due to the cold snap. I'm dying to dig into this a little bit different, or take a different perspective on it. If you could give us first a little bit of what you do.
Absolutely. So I represent a company called Enserva, and our mandate is to lobby and advocate on behalf of the energy service supply and manufacturing sectors. So the way I explain it to everybody else is we represent the workforce. That's the energy behind the energy. They're the ones that are out in different communities, in rural, remote locations, in extreme adverse weather conditions. So just even up until last week when we had minus 46, minus 50 in some locations and above, or below further, we put out a message thanking the energy workers because not a lot of Canadians quite understand the climate and the conditions that people work in order to make sure that our homes are heated, we can turn our lights on without worrying about, do we have enough electricity right now? So I think that goes a long way, and that's who we represent. We represent that workforce and the companies that employ them. And I have to say, when I worked at Stars before, that was a fulfilling job, in that we were there to save lives. But I can say this is just as fulfilling, and if not more, because this sector is thriving, and the continual change and just actually having that opportunity to represent the service supply and manufacturing sector is phenomenal.
I think we forget, or we don't realize how fortunate we are here in Canada, in Calgary, in North America, as to the flip of the switch, the access to internet, that this is actually, it's a minority position of having simple access to luxuries of all types of energy. We're talking from petroleum to natural gas to even the evolution we're seeing perpetual energy through nuclear.
Yeah.
So there's all these opportunities that we see. What are some of the things that you can kind of, based on your inside information, that understanding of the evolution of energy, that you see that we're going to be coming down the pipe here in Alberta? Where are some differences that we have coming forward?
I think when it comes to the energy evolution, as we're calling it, and quite frankly, the transformation for Albertans, it's something that's always been happening. So it's not something that came from like a government term or conversation. We've always been down this path of how do we ensure that there's energy for Canadians going into the future. So the sector isn't what it used to be 40 years ago, even 20 years ago. We have now diversified into various forms of energy, and that includes nuclear, that includes investment in solar and wind power generations, that includes geothermal. I mean, there's companies now that are doing amazing things in even lithium mining, and it's across Alberta and even into other Western provinces. And we all work together. As much as a lot of people out east don't think that the Western provinces are actually working together, Saskatchewan's a great partner for us. And I think there's an evolution that's natural evolution. We just don't talk about it. And that didn't serve us very well in the last, I would say, decade, in that, we were heads down getting the work done and continuing on normal life. And we should have done a better job at educating the public on the work that we are doing and how we are creating a cleaner future for not just Canadians, but for the rest of the world as well. Like, the rest of the world can actually do well with Canadian energy.
You just touched on something that's a very interesting topic. A lot of the people in the energy industries are still of an older generation, right? So they're not into the newer messaging. So we've seen younger people or younger media companies come up and be able to actually blast us sideways and kind of hijack the narrative. What do you think is shifting within the messaging? Because I absolutely agree. We're seeing solar companies working with gas companies working. We're seeing this tapestry of absolute energy. Like, we are one of the most energy secure places, I believe, in North America. But what's changing their mindset around messaging?
From my personal point of view, I think it was something that we had to do in order to change the overarching message that's out in public right now, in the public sphere. And the issue is, we've always worked together. It's not, traditional petroleum, oil and gas versus other forms of energy. It's never been that. It has been made that in the public sphere because of, whether it's media or governments coming up with their own messaging and coming up with a narrative that we just didn't combat from the get-go. And we should have, but hindsight,
I know. I've got kids. We can test that theory.
Yeah,
Hindsight, 2020.
It's hindsight. But, as we move forward into the future, I think all of us realize that that's not serving us. And we need to actually start showcasing and saying, not only are we saying we work together, we actually do work together. I had a very interesting conversation with some of our representatives from the federal government. And I said, where do you think workers from oil and gas, as they're saying, that they need to be transitioned into new workforce? I'm like, so where do you think we're going to find people to get you into new forms of energy? Like, if you take geothermal, simple example, I'm like, it includes drilling. So you still need the drillers from an oil rig that have that experience. And that experience translates into a geothermal site. Like, there's no, let's cut off this industry to supply another industry. You need the intellectual capital. You need the workforce to actually continue into this new realm of different forms of energy. And we all understand where growth is happening. More and more people are utilizing energy across the globe. Countries like India have gotten up on world stages and said, and I'm going to paraphrase, but we're not doing anything until we have what the Western world has. And that's in terms of energy. And, they've publicly announced that they've invested in more coal mines. And it kind of makes me laugh a little bit in that we get so stuck in this conversation of zero emissions. And I'm like, fantastic, but we don't live in a bubble of emissions. Like, we all share the same atmosphere at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So what can we do as Canadians to help countries like India, like China, actually get off their own emissions scorecard and help them alleviate some of their emissions that they're putting out that will actually help the atmosphere across the globe, not just let's focus on Canada and destroying an industry, which could actually help the rest of the world.
Well, and at the end of the day, we have to, seriously, people need to understand what the term feedstock is when it comes to petroleum, and how the reality around, if we're actually just looking at the eco footprint of petroleum, the Canadian petroleum will be the last petroleum phased out because of its density, because it does lend itself so well to, oh, by the way, the front bumper on your Tesla. It does lend itself well to fire retardant materials so you don't blow up your house with your electricity, things like that. And you know what? Good on India, because here's the reality. We keep going, all these countries that have not had the same advantages as we have in North America. Remember, we own all of our shorelines. It's a pretty safe place to be. We're very blessed to be here. But being able to remove food, shelter, education, and medication scarcity mindsets away from society allows society to then evolve. So by just getting electricity to everybody, every mother with a child,
absolutely,
right, is critical. And that's really where I think we should be focused on our leadership globally, is stepping up to countries that are in energy challenges and helping them. Because the scrubbers, I was mentioning this before, we think of coal as coal miner's daughter, and and it really isn't. It's still very much a dangerous job. It still has its challenges, but the technology that goes into burning coal is night and day. It's like in 2021 for copywriting to 2024 of copywriting with GPT. The literally technology is changing the way we utilize.
I mean, in oil and gas, petroleum, energy, whatever you want to term it these days, it is on the forefront of any innovation that's taking place. And I tell this to my kids, I tell it to their friends, I tell it to anybody that's listening. If you want to be in artificial intelligence, you want to be in technology, you want to be creating robotics, come work in the energy sector, because this is one of the very few industries that will allow you to work from the ground up into the C-suite within a decade or a little bit longer in some cases, but you get to try different things, and within the same company or different companies that merge or get acquired. But we're presenting robo dogs to a group of high school students just so they can see this, and like the drone technology that's out there, how they're using artificial intelligence on even chemicals and ensuring what emissions are being caused through methane or other areas. And there's so much happening in this industry that not a lot of people are understanding. And I just think it's not just oil and gas that gets to experience this. It's also medical fields.
Yes.
They are recipients of us.
Ag.
Agriculture, which
defense,
your food.
So
exactly.
So the development of the technologies that are going in to help us be better stewards of our energy are transferable to what feeds us, to what protects us, to what can serve our life longer. There is not a surgical suite you can find that doesn't have a petroleum product in it, because everything is wrapped in plastic for sanitation, or you talk about different valves that can go into the bodies. These types of things are important. So I think if we spent less time arguing,
absolutely,
more time bringing that together. Now, this leads me to the Alberta advantage. And I really do believe we do have an advantage because we are an epicenter for med tech and biotech, and we've got prop tech, so property development technology happening. It's crazy, and it seems as if even though we're becoming more efficient within our manpower in the petroleum space, we are seeing some of that knowledge transition, and that's leading to our young population developing further. Walk me through where you see petroleum industry specifically and Enserva starting to interface with some of the cool stuff that's happening here in Calgary.
So I think some of the cool stuff that we're like from an Enserva point of view, we've always said, like, let's make this an association that's into the future and not just the same old that we're, and I just don't operate that way either. So if we're saying we represent the energy workforce and the innovators behind the energy, then we actually have to do things that are a little bit more ingenuitive and moving the needle across. So, you know, we were dealing with a couple of issues a couple of years ago. Well, there's more than one issue, but for us, it was around, you know, the labor crunch. So there was this massive labor crunch. Young people didn't want to look at the energy sector because there's no future, and that was the message they were hearing loud and clear. We couldn't attract workers back into the sector because after COVID, it just never got back on track. There wasn't enough investment coming into the country, and people were scared that jobs were going to be lost further. And oil and gas and energy as a whole became this persona non grata kind of industry. And it wasn't until we all started speaking up and saying, listen, this is what's happening across Europe with the Russia-Ukraine war. And they're begging for us to help them. And so if we have that opportunity in Alberta and within Canada, why wouldn't we unleash that to the rest of the world and unlock Canadian energy to help the rest of the world and make the rest of the world a better place? And for the workforce, I said, you know, what can we do to get people back into the sector? So one was actually getting into some schools, and that's a whole other ballgame. But, you know, we were able to partner with organizations like STEM Innovation Academy to say, how do we get this message about oil and gas out there for young people that are in junior high and high school, saying, here's some jobs to be had. You know, I sit on the Premier Skill Council here in Alberta, which is also very unique. Saskatchewan doesn't have one. BC doesn't have one. And the government is focusing on, how do we get young people into trades again? Or how do we get them coming back into different sectors, whether it's construction, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's hospitality? Like, let's focus on this. And because we're a young city at the end of the day. Yeah. And so if we're attracting all this talent into the city, they're going to need jobs, and they're going to need somewhere to land and stay and have that opportunity that, you know, my parents had, or I have currently, and I'm hoping my kids have into the future. So I think for us, we focused on the labor issue, and we're actually launching an app and a platform, and it's called the Working Energy Program, I believe it is. And my comms people will kill me, but I based it off of Tinder. So we called it Labor Tinder, and it was
that's awesome.
Let's start matching people. They can swipe right, swipe left, figure out what matches. And it was with companies getting out of their you know, back at the computers and actually putting jobs out right where young people can access it. They upload their profiles. They put in whether they've got certain training, whether it's first aid, bear awareness, you know, H2S certificates. And if they don't, there's a click down menu for them to say, okay, click here. You can go to these institutions that provide it, get your ticket. It'll upload your profile.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And
centralizing all that information.
Exactly. And then get matched with companies that are doing the hiring, because outside of the energy sector, you don't know the difference between a service supply manufacturing company, who's a producer, who's just a strictly engineering company. You just don't know.
Correct.
And, you know, when we look at the traditional ways of bringing people in, it was job fairs. Not a lot of people are going to job fairs anymore. And it's like, how do you attract them? And so we were like, let's do virtual. Let's utilize AI to get some of this data in, and let's start matching them with employers. And the employers will take on their due diligence on hiring and you know, what they need to do on their HR practices, but we're providing a platform to say, we'll provide you with matches, and then you get women joining. We're targeting Indigenous groups to say,
Yeah,
here's opportunities for you, and ethnic groups. Like I always say, I'm like, my parents, when they came to this country, I had the route of going to med school or becoming an engineer and going to law school. There was nothing else that my parents said I was going to be able to do because they didn't know any better, right? So
Yeah.
why
you had
not?
good parents, though. You had good
We
parents.
had great parents. I mean, I love my parents. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
I look at this sector today and I'm like, wow, what if I knew I could become a landwoman and join a company?
And there's I love the fact that you're putting a centralized space to access tickets and understand how to get those. Because as we know, with income disparity, we are seeing this. We are seeing shelter scarcity. These are real things. And then when you are a youth that's raised underneath a loving parent, but that parent is in financial distress or struggling, they don't have the skill set or the fortitude to help guide their young adult through those understanding how to apply for the different certificates or the 1 year, 12-year, or 12-month or a 2-year certificate, anything along those lines. And so I think that's where a lot of the breakdown, because we're seeing that in some of the municipalities now, they will actually have people that will come and help young people. By the way, this is how we do the paperwork.
Yeah.
And I think that is, for me, when you're talking about this app, that's actually the coolest part, is it's going to demystify how you can move up economically.
Absolutely. And we wanted to make sure that, right? Like if you look at a lot of the oil field service companies or the suppliers or the manufacturers actually will pay for your training on certain aspects of getting, if you want a transportation company, you want a class 1 or a class 5, we will get you there. And this is the investment of the companies within the person. But a lot of people don't know that. Yeah. So it becomes this like, you're stuck in a cycle. How do I get involved? Oh my gosh, I don't have enough qualifications. And so just even being able to demystify some of that I'm hoping is going to be a solution for all industry.
Well, and it's that ripple effect. Even if it's just one person that you're able to help, say that you do this and we can change the trajectory of your life.
Exactly.
I also love the fact people we talk a lot about the negative and the conflict between the Indigenous and petroleum. However, I know that in Saskatchewan, they have a whole program of a collaboration between the petroleum and the Indigenous, and that during COVID, they were able to train 350 young Indigenous individuals to go into this. So literally changing the entire trajectory of their life and financials and helping them, put that foot on that first ladder of financial equality.
Yep.
So can you share with us a little bit of what we're doing, what you're seeing on the front? Because this just gets me so excited.
There's so much going on. So the best news story came out of COP for us in Dubai. So we were there. I hosted a panel it was an all-female panel. It was very purposeful to showcase to the world that what you guys are saying about us isn't actually true. Females are playing a huge part in this sector. And we also had Karen Auger from First Nations LNG as part of that panel. And after our discussions, we had a lot of First Nations from other countries come and speak to us. And they were just shocked that somebody like Karen was speaking with us in partnership. And some of the feedback back was, you're at the table while we're still trying to get our foot in the door. And that to me, I'm like, okay, why aren't we talking about that? Where is Canada at with Indigenous reconciliation, economic reconciliation? But more importantly, the energy sector is actually leading the way with that.
Yes.
So for Enserva and a lot of our members, we've taken the first steps. I mean, there's more to be done. But if you look at the site reclamation program that was launched a few years ago, I want to say 5 years ago, it was a program that worked hand in hand with Indigenous communities because we're reclaiming the land. But not only that, it was also an opportunity to bring on Indigenous-owned companies that may never have existed before, do now exist, and provide a new avenue to create prosperity for for them and for their nations. And there was women involved that never worked in a company before, that they've started their own reclamation companies. And I think that's a story that doesn't get told. We're working with our remote workforce lodgings companies, so quote unquote, the camp companies. And how do we now create, safer environments for everybody?
For everyone.
But importantly, how do you incorporate Indigenous teachings within your business? And I have to tell you, you don't get to have these type of conversations with a lot of industries. So the fact that this industry is willing to do that and create a safer work environment for everybody, but also ensure we're incorporating, culture and practices from Indigenous communities, it's huge. And I'm really proud of that. I think we have a lot more work to do. We at Enserva are partnering up with groups like the Indigenous Resource Council. So Stephen Buffalo runs that up. We're in dialogue with Dale Swampy on a regular basis, just because we don't know what we don't know. And why not help other associations that are doing this work already and help uplift that and exemplify and amplify that?
This is a conversation that I believe, when you take out politics and opinions and you just look at the brass tacks of what comes to the table, I think we could actually all move forward faster and remove a lot of the friction within the space. When we're looking at this and the evolution of bringing an app to the forefront, of creating united councils and open dialogue, what is 1, 2, or 3 strategy tips, insights that you could give a young professional, be it in a C-suite position or an E-suite position or that NetSuite, wherever they're at, because Calgary's got it all? What would be some of that advice that you would want to impart to these young professionals?
I think for a lot of young professionals, I was one before, there's a lot of fear of the unknown. But there's also that fear of, I don't know what I don't know. So I always tell young people, if you want a challenge and you want a career for life, join the energy sector. But at the same time, you need to network within different communities. So join clubs like the Petroleum Club that have networking nights for you, so you can establish these opportunities to find mentors, but also have conversations and just ask the questions like, what's next? How do I do this? Because a lot of people just don't know. We had some summer students working with us, and they were first year university students, had no clue about the energy sector until we sent them out. And it was kind of funny to watch them a little scared about going to networking events and seeing things, but watching them talk to people and get that mentorship, it was phenomenal to see. It creates a base and a foundation for you to step up to the next level. The other thing I always tell young people is, like, take a chance and don't be scared to fail. Like, everybody in leadership has failed numerous times, and we're all still standing. So take the chance. Like, do not get into your own head. Like, don't take a company down with you, but take the chances. Don't be afraid. And what's the worst that could possibly happen? But the other advice I always give back to that same community that you live in and you work in, because A, you create your contacts. B, you give back to a cause that quite frankly needs you. And that's what Calgary is all about. We're all about creating prosperity, but we're also about giving back to our communities that we thrive in. So I would say those are some of the things that I look at as a young person. If somebody would told me ahead of time, like, take your chances, network with many people as you possibly can, and then give back.
Thank you for joining us today on the Back to Business podcast. Be sure to visit calpeteclub.com, CALPETECLUB.com, to find out more about upcoming events, networking opportunities, and membership. If you are not already a valued member at the CPC, where we are proudly connecting and supporting Calgary's business leaders.